Right away, we'll dive into it. Matt and I started the distillery here in 2017. It was kind of this dream for us, growing up in Canmore, business partner growing up in Banff, looking to find something to keep us in the valley, but to be able to do something interesting, different than construction or hospitality. And we liked drinking spirits. We liked drinking beer and wine and all those other things. But distilling was something that was very interesting to us. We started just at home by building a little still, doing some home mashes in a soup kettle at a family restaurant, and then eventually building a little still from a miniature water heater, and miraculously getting spirit off of it. Pretty shitty spirit, but it was spirit nonetheless. And from there, we kind of shook hands and said, all right, we can do this. So in 2017, we opened. Tonight, we're going to be tasting a range of our spirits, starting in the gin category, moving into our whiskeys. But we're also going to be touring around our new production facility. So in 2023, we moved into this new space. So we moved from a 600 square foot original distillery, mash, ferment, distill on a 500 liter pot still. We're now operating out of the new facility, which you'll see tonight is just a little bit bigger and a whole lot more efficient. And we're still able to produce our amazing spirits that Wild Life's known for. So we'll start with our classic gin here. So this was the first gin that we produced in 2017. So started with a vodka launch in January of 2017 when we opened. Soon after that came our classic gin. So if you have that in your glass, just start by nosing it. I know you're here for the whiskey, but we're starting with, some of our early products to kind of show you the evolution of Wild Life as well. So 43.3%. It is distilled from Wild Life spirits. So we're producing a neutral grain spirit from 90% red spring wheat and 10% malted barley. We're then taking that, filtering it through our filtration system, similar to what we'd be doing for a vodka. But instead of packaging this vodka, we're then pushing that spirit into our gin still, adding our botanicals, so juniper, coriander, angelic root, orris root, cassia bark, and then citrus. So that's all macerating in the still, boiling away, rolling in the liquid. And then we have our citrus peels, so lemon, orange, blood orange, and grapefruit, that sit in a vapor basket. So using two different methods of extraction based on how delicate those citrus peels are. We want just that vapor pushing through the column, through that basket, to extract those beautiful oils as opposed to boiling those citrus peels in the still itself. So juniper, big juniper, the coriander's there close behind. It also has this big citrus palate with a middle layer of roots and then a touch of spice towards the end. But yeah, finishes like our vodka would in a sense, where it doesn't have that harsh juniper bomb punch you in the face and then harsh finish from say a less refined spirit. It is balanced. It's not just juniper. There's a whole bunch of things going on. So really nice in a martini, but also your classic kind of gin cocktails right into the gin old fashioned or barrel-aged gin old fashioned. So it lends itself to a bunch of different cocktails. And yeah, this is quite biased, but quite a tasty. So
yeah, I totally agree, Keith. Sammy says, yum, this is nice gin, love the citrus on it. And I gotta agree, like I've been lucky enough to have your gin and I've tasted your gin pretty close to since first release. I think I've had it here and there, and I've always been impressed with the citrus notes on it and how they kind of balance out the juniper without going into this sort of like sweetness territory that a lot of new world gins do. Still keeps things on the dry side, and that peppercorn note helps keep that just spice amped up just enough so that it's not going like cloying on the palate, which is really nice too.
Yeah, oh, awesome. Yeah, glad you guys can enjoy it wherever you're sitting tonight. And I mean, most of our stuff is available in Alberta, but you can also get it through the Kensington store if you're looking for a nice bottle of gin or whiskey shipped to wherever you might be. So cool. Well, we'll move inside and we'll start we'll dive into another gin. Oh, before I forget, you also have a can of the Silent Flight. So this is a non-alcoholic raspberry mojito. So you can either sip on this throughout the tasting just to kind of cleanse your palate throughout the way. I would also recommend a little bit of water between spirits just to kind of cleanse your palate. But you can either finish this gin, or you can crack this, take a sip, or a little bit of gin in there, because this also goes really well with our vodka or our gin. So just an option. But yeah, we'll walk inside here.
So yeah, Keith and I chatted for a few minutes beforehand, and we talked about doing sort of a virtual tour of everything, and I think Keith's plan might include kind of running us through a bit of the steps for mashing through to distillation as well. So it could be a little bit more of a different tasting than we typically do.
Yeah, so this is our production space. I'm not sure how wide a lens you can see here. But so a 6,000 square foot building that we renovated throughout we purchased in 2021, renovated throughout 2022, and then moved in 2023. So we've been in the space for just over 2 years. And yeah, just larger equipment, a lot more floor space, tanks, place for us to move around and to work a lot more efficiently compared to the 600 square foot tiny stills Tetris game that we were playing with all the different tanks, moving them around, trying to produce everything that we do. So we'll start over here in the kind of grain handling area. So all of our grain is coming in these little big white bulk bags. So in here we have our wheat. So wheat, rye also comes in the bulk bags. We also have malted barley coming in from a maltster in the province. So we're typically producing one product at a time. Currently, we're producing neutral spirit for our vodka and gin, so kind of our white base, which is a 90% red spring wheat, 10% malted barley. So our grain kind of comes in the door, hangs out here. We'll then weigh our mash bill recipes into these buckhorn bins. So we're weighing our recipe into that bin. And then once we're ready to start mashing, you'll see a bin here on top of the mill. So this bin will then sit on top of the mill, and we will open, obviously we'll turn on the mill, we'll turn on the auger, and then we'll open a slide gate. So that grain will start trickling into the hammer mill, and that hammer mill is then spinning. Probably gonna make a little bit of a mess here. But you can see here, your grain is falling through the trap door. It's then coming into this area here, and these metal tines are then just spinning around and taking the grain. You just stay focused from a whole grain. So this is a malted barley, and then essentially taking it, turning it into grist, right? So we don't want just flour. We still want to keep some particles there. But as you can see in the mill here, we have kind of a fine grist, a little bit of flour, lots of surface area, exposing those starches so that when they hit that mash tun and hit that hot water, we're able to get as much starch converted to sugar as possible. Yeah, I'll leave that there.
Is there anything in there?
Yeah, there's probably green in there actually.
No.
Yeah, okay. But so if you're kind of working your way through the gin, and you're looking for something else to sip on, feel free to finish everything or keep some in your glass, come back to it later on. I'm going to start talking about our Alberta Botanical gin. So this is a gin that we do once a year. Started out in 2018, I believe, with this gin. And this is a single batch once a year that we're hand picking Alberta Botanicals. So our other gins we're producing throughout the year, we're producing still very small volumes compared to the gin industry, or the scale of all the gin being produced in the world. But this is a single batch hand-picked Alberta juniper, thistle flower, rose hips, Labrador tea leaves, wild sage, cow parsnip leaves. And then this year, so last fall's rendition, we then blended in some Alberta Saskatoon, as well as some Alberta ginger. So this is it's a very unique gin in terms of profile. You do get a lot more kind of green juniper through. The Rocky Mountain juniper is greener and not quite as sweet as your traditional Bulgarian, Macedonia, kind of Eastern European junipers. But yeah, it has this very, very interesting botanical profile. And then we're adding in that Saskatoon juice and a touch of ginger to kind of, balance out that sweetness that you're getting from the Saskatoon. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Nosewise, and I had the previous year's version, and it's was it the cow parsnip or whatever you call it?
Yep.
So that's kind of been a continuing theme for a lot of the Alberta gin botanicals so far, right?
Yeah. So that's been the throughout all of the years. That cow parsnip is that main profile that we've kept. We've changed. Some years we have had sage, some years we haven't. But that cow parsnip is kind of a staple in this Alberta botanical gin. It is so unique and interesting. It's kind of like a watermelon seed or a grape seed that you like bite into. It's got this like earthiness, smokiness that really lends well to a very unique like gin profile. But then adding in the juice and the ginger kind of just like creates this very, very unique sipping, mixing gin. But one batch a year. Every year is a little bit different. And it's our way of kind of saying thank you to not only Alberta grain and water, but the botanicals that we have here, and
very cool.
Kind of a terroir gin.
Yeah. It's right now for me. It's going a little bit earthier, but it still has that fruit note coming through and the sweetness from there. But it still has that. I was thinking almost dill note coming off the nose when I first got it, but I'm guessing that's more into the sage note.
Yeah. I think dill as well could be seen, or you could pull dill out from the cow parsnip as well. It's like it's quite this it's hard to describe the flavor, but once you taste it and you taste the seed, you're like, that's cow parsnip. So that's that main flavor that you're tasting there. There is that Alberta juniper, but we've toned it down for this one because we wanted the cow parsnip as well as the fruit and the ginger. The ginger's just there. Playing around with ginger. We didn't want it to be a spicy gin, but it did add another layer of complexity to it. Yeah,
there's just a hint of heat coming through there. Kevin says roses for sure he gets. Sammy appreciates the concept. Kevin was a bit confused, as I was when I first heard the term cow parsnip, he figured out it's not an actual parsnip. But it's cool to see sort of like a more foraged version of the classic gin.
Yeah. So hopefully you're enjoying that. Well, around the corner here, over here we just have kind of empty packaging storage, can storage, washrooms, boiler room, like basically the heating and cooling systems. Kind of cool if you're an engineer or interested in that type of stuff, but we'll kind of stick to the main guts of the distillery in terms of brewing and distillation side of things. So essentially, once the grain is milled, this giant white tube, or it's not giant, but it's it's long, is then pulling the grain up into the mash tun, and then the grain is falling through our hydrator. So this hydrator, your grain is coming into the mash tun here. We have hot water pushing into the mash tun from a hot water tank that's preheated by steam. And your grain and your water is mixing as it's falling into the mash tun. We then have an agitator running in there. So that's mixing the grain and water as it slowly fills up. So it takes about an hour to mash in. And then once our mash tun's full, so it's just over a ton of grain. So 1,100 kilos of grain, 3-ish thousand liters of water. So it's kind of a 4,000 liter system that we're doing. So once we're full, we'll have that 4,000 liters of grain, hot water. We're adjusting pH, and we're getting that mash to the perfect temperature for the enzymes within that malt barley, as well as some additional enzymes being added for the conversion or the facilitation of the enzymes to convert starches to sugars, right? So this is where we're getting all of our fermentable sugars from in the mash tun. Once we've extracted all of our sugar from the grain, we're not watering, so there's no false bottoming here because we're now on grain. We're milling a little bit finer, and essentially we're transferring this entire mixture or slurry through a heat exchanger. So opening up a few valves, pushing it through a pump, and then pushing it through our heat exchanger. So we now have chilled water that kind of comes in from the bottom and floods this chamber. And then the mash is then traveling down through some small tubes. And as it travels down that heat exchanger, the cold water that enters from the bottom is picking up that heat off the mash. The mash, or the now wort, leaves cool at the bottom, and our cold water leaves the top. And now hot, and it pushes into our hot water tank that we'll reuse for the next mash or cleaning. So we're kind of preheating our hot water tank with the heat from the mash. So once our wort is now in our fermenters, so on Mondays we'll generally do 2 mashes. That's kind of our current cycle. We have a lot more capacity here, but we're only producing as much as we can afford to produce based on cash flow, and B, what we need for inventory. So we're producing our white spirits, laying some whiskey away. So we're laying quite a bit more whiskey than we used to, but we still have a lot of capacity to grow in this space. So once our wort is in here, we're adding our yeast. We're adding some nutrient for that yeast, and that fermentation is going to start to take off. So roughly a 72-hour fermentation, where our yeast are now eating the sugars and converting those sugars to alcohol, CO2, and heat. So we're temperature controlled. We're keeping our mash at a certain temperature using glycol cooling jackets to maintain a fermentation temperature and an optimal fermentation temperature to produce as much ethanol as possible and as little off alcohols as possible, so that we can maximize our efficiencies in fermentation, just like we're trying to maximize our efficiencies in the mashing process of getting as much sugar or starch converted to sugar as possible. So any questions on the mash fermentation side?
Well, I've just got a comment, and I saw this. The last time I was up was actually just before you guys opened, when you were doing sort of like a sneak peek on it, which was really cool. But it just strikes me, and maybe I'll share this picture if it'll allow me. For those of you that haven't seen it, this is a bit of what the first distillery looks like. So vastly different in size. That is the still on the left there, smaller alembic still, and just tiny area. Not a whole lot of spots for putting in casks and stuff either at the original spot, which it's still around, is it not, Kevin or Keith?
Yeah, we've started to we've kind of moved a lot of the equipment out, and we've converted it into our cocktail bar. So
Cool.
tasting rooms kind of moved into there. We just got rid of the fermenters, but that's still sitting there. So it's kind of a nice industrial cocktailing space as well. So, but yeah, big change
Nice.
from that 500-liter still. That mash tun that you saw there was like we would stand on a little platform and like stir the mash. Like there was literally sweat and love going into all those mashes, which made some pretty amazing whiskey. But we were fermenting in plastic totes at the start. We then, got fermenters there. But it's been a slow progression of how we produce our product throughout the way. So this was a big step for us. But I can confirm that we're still making a great product, even with
Nice.
changing the equipment, changing the stills and everything else. So, so yeah, Monday mash, Friday we're kind of finishing out our fermentation. And then once we're done fermenting, we have roughly a 10 to 12% distiller's beer. So yeah, looking to make as much alcohol as possible. We're not looking to consume this beer. We don't need residual sugars left over there like you would like in a beer. We want to ferment this right out to a 0 gravity, because we're now looking to then separate those alcohols from the water and the organics in order to start the first process of distillation. So we'll kind of push across to the distillery side now. Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to say, Keith, and it didn't really strike me until you were showing this part of it, is it seems like having that small area has really sort of informed you guys on how you wanted to set everything up. It looks like very methodical as it's set up on the outside on the mash side of things.
Yeah. I mean, keeping as much, trying to be as not just efficient with your raw materials, but the space that you're working in as well, making sure that you're utilizing the space efficiently, not just from a workflow perspective, but a footprint perspective, right? If we want to, add future tanks, then we have space for those tanks, or, upgrading the bottling line, or on the far side, we have a lot of storage of empty packaging material. So we need to, even though, you know, the building seemed big when we moved in, you fill it up pretty quickly. So yeah,
Right on.
so this is then a separate room separated by a 4-hour firewall. So kind of crazy building code, fire code, bits and pieces that you have to go through, building a distillery around the world, but in Alberta, it has been a challenge. It always has been, but yeah, working through those bits and pieces with the province too, to kind of help them better understand craft distilling versus industrial scale distilling, which is what the code is currently written as, right? So we're kind of seen as, sorry, this is what the code says, which is, yeah, it's always a learning process when, you know, building something new. So, but yeah, over here, this is kind of where the magic happens. Before we dive too deep into the distillation process, why don't we dive into the first whiskey? So you should have a wheat whiskey sitting in front of you. So that's kind of where we're going to start tonight. Set up. So this was first whiskey that we released. It was also the first whiskey that we distilled. And our oldest wheat whiskey now is 6.8-ish years. This will be the third year. So third fall was fall of 2022 that we released our first whiskey, which was pretty cool because whiskey was kind of the dream coming into this distillery project. Wheat being the first whiskey that we released, because that's kind of what we built the distillery on. So those are our foundations of our vodka and our gins, built from that wheat and malted barley. So the exact same mash bill here, 90% wheat, 10% barley. Obviously, the mashing process is very similar. Fermentation, we're using a different yeast, getting more kind of funky flavors, more ester, you know, a richer beer, as opposed to distilling a beer for vodka, which you want to be a little more neutral. And then aging in new American oak, but also a little bit of ex-bourbon for a minimum of 3.5 years. So that's what's on this bottle. It is at 45.3%. This was the initial release was an 8-barrel batch. We're now kind of doing 12-barrel batches. So harvesting 12 barrels at a time, but still utilizing the same kind of blend ratio where we're blending in new American oak wheat, a little bit of ex-bourbon in the wheat category. So aging in both those different barrel profiles. And then 1 to 2 barrels, depending on the barrel, the batch size, of 100% rye. So that's what you're going to see on the back of the bottle here. Aged minimum 3.5 years, mash bill 61% wheat, 26% barley, and 13% rye. Barrel being 53-gallon white American oak, but it's a blend of new and ex-bourbon. So by aging in our new American oak barrels as well as ex-bourbon, we essentially have, if you're looking at our 3 categories of whiskey, wheat whiskey, rye whiskey, single malt whiskey, we then have 3 different whiskey types, but 6 different barrel types to pick from when we're bringing our recipes together and blending these batches. So we have a lot of creative control on the far end, as well as a lot of control during the mashing, the fermentation, the distillation process. So with this wheat whiskey, Keith, this is the latest whiskey that we have gotten, or that you have put out. It just came out beginning of April, wasn't it? Somewhere around there. The rye came out in March, but this wheat is still from last October, November. Okay, pardon me. Yeah. Have you noticed, because you do stuff in batches, batch variation from year to year on the wheat? A little bit. I'd say as our whiskey's getting older, so that first year, all of the barrels were 3.5 years old. This release, some of the barrels were 5 years old, some were 4.5, and some were 3.5. So I would say as the whiskey's getting older, and as you know, being a small distillery, all of this whiskey came off of that 500-liter still. So variations in raw material, a little bit in the distillation, but you're essentially doing a bunch of fermentation, distillation. We might have had 1,000 liters that were then barreling all into a bunch of different barrels at once. But it's all that same whiskey going into that barrel. But barrel to barrel, you're seeing differences. You're seeing spice notes or kind of caramel or vanillins from a certain barrel. So batch to batch, for sure, we're seeing variations, but it's still very much that has that wildlife wheat whiskey profile that we know and people can expect.
Yeah, I almost want to try. I think I've got a small bottle of the first batch release somewhere hanging around, but this one strikes me up as being very like coconut and buttery driven on the nose, like massive buttery note to it, which is really cool. Really, very toasty, of course, with that wheat note, but also has like a sort of a dusty grain quality that I really enjoy in there as well. Kevin says very spirit forward. I'd say very cereal driven as well here, which is really cool. But there does seem to be a bit of that virgin oak interaction where you get a bit of that wood spice and char coming through, and maybe that's where the coconut notes coming from for me as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah, kind of toasty, caramelized coconut. Yeah. So yeah, there's, I mean, predominantly new American oak here, with a touch of ex-bourbon, right? So it is a more kind of bourbon American rye style, a lot of wood. But yeah, this is a really nice whiskey. This is kind of our entry level whiskey, right? Where it's complex enough, but it's not like, whoa, what's going on there? It's soft, it's sweet. It has, you know, some slight peppery notes, but it's our, you're not really into whiskey? Try this one first, or at least smell it. And people smell it and they're like, oh, I might just try it. And this is kind of our gateway into wildlife whiskey. So yeah,
I think that's a great call. That for me, it's when selling it at the store, I find it's I love introducing it to people that really haven't done much in Canadian whiskey other than Crown Royal and what have you for mixing, and this is like the next stepping stone from that for me, where it still has a lot of that Canadian whiskey style to it, where it's very approachable. A lot of vanilla notes, as you were saying as well, but has more complexity and more character to it as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'll sip on this one. I'll also stir it into a nice old fashioned or shake it in with some stick. Like it's a great cocktailing whiskey. Once you get a little further down the line here, more so into the single malts, that that you're probably going to sip on those. But it's fun to play around with some of the more kind of bourbon American rye style whiskeys in those traditional whiskey cocktails. So awesome. Well, I'll dive into the whiskey distillation side of it. Can you kind of see this whole the whole show here? This is kind of where this is the romantic side of what we're doing. Owning and running a distillery, we thought would be extremely romantic. But the days that I get to spend in here, whether it's doing some distillation or harvesting whiskey or barreling whiskey, this is what really kind of gets me going, is being in the production space, tasting and trialing and kind of playing around with different flavors. But there's a million other things that Matt and I are generally doing throughout the day, and we've now got to hire people to do the fun stuff. I'm still quite involved with production in terms of production planning and being around for certain aspects around the distillation process. But we've got a great little team here that are doing a really good job of continuing to produce the wildlife spirits. So
very cool.
Our whiskey, our wort, is now going to come across the wall. So we're going to push it from our fermenters across the wall into our 4,000 liter still. So 4,000 liter mash, 4,000 liter fermenter, directly into the 4,000 liter still. And that first distillation that we're doing is a stripping run. So what we're doing is essentially we're just bringing that beer up to the temp where the alcohol vapors are going to separate from your water and organics. So 4,000 liters, what we're getting off this still here, we're running right up through this little initial column and then running that vapor straight across the backside of the still. So not utilizing the columns for that stripping run. And then what we're getting is about 1,000 to 1,100 liters of low wines, which is the initial stage, or that's kind of your what you get from your first distillation. And it's just a mixture of all of your different alcohols and esters and oils produced during your fermentation, right? So it's the halfway stage. So once we have 3 fermenters stripped off, we then have about 33 to 3,000 liters of low wines. ready for a spirit run. So at that point, our low wines will then transfer back into the spirit still. And this is where we're going to be doing our spirit distillation. So we're bringing those low wines up to temp. And we're now distilling it to rectify it to 95% if we're making vodka, utilizing the pot, but also now the 2 columns. So rectifying that spirit every time it pushes from travels up the columns. We're then diverting that vapor flow down here into the bottom of column number 1. Same thing into column number 2. And every time it travels and boils off of one plate to the next, it's dropping behind water and increasing in purity. So what we're starting in the pot here is 30 to 31%. We're then maybe 40, 42, 44. So it's increasing in purity as it travels through the columns. And what we get out the tail end, so at the top of the column number 2, that vapor then pushes into a condenser. So once again, we have cold water kind of flooding the condenser body, and then the vapor is then starting to travel down through the condenser tubes and is flipping back to liquid state before it travels out and into a final spirit tank, right? So what we're getting from that is roughly, so 4,000 liters of beer times 3. So 1,200 liters of beer becomes 3,000 liters of low wines at about 30 to 35%. 35% is on the high end. And from that, we now have 1,000 liters of 95% neutral spirit. So Wild Life neutral spirit that we're now making our vodka and all of our gins from. So that's kind of the initial stage to make neutral spirit. Before I dive back into the whiskey or the gin, let's look at our rye.
Very cool.
So rye whiskey. So this was this is once again our 3rd year releasing the rye. This is actually one of the older labels. We kind of refreshed the label, made it a little darker green, give it more of that like classic rye dark green, and popped it with some foil similar to what we had on the wheat bottle this year, but this was an older bottle batch from last year. Yeah, so the rye is, we're distilling all of our whiskeys individually, right? So distilling 100% rye, aging the rye once again in new oak, but also some ex-bourbon. So we have 100% rye sitting in those barrels that we're then, when we go to harvest, tasting a few barrels of rye. We might lay out 20 samples on a long table and taste a few of the barrels, kind of, they're pushing glasses forward or backwards and kind of like subtly letting each other know which ones we like and which ones are really special and we're going to save those, and which ones maybe need a little more time, right? So kind of figuring out which barrels we want to blend together. But on the rye, we wanted to kind of bring in a little bit of soft kind of cereal rounder barley notes to help kind of soften that spiciness, that earthy green spicy bits that you're getting from that intense 100% rye. So in this rye, we have on the first batch, it was 7 barrels of rye and 1 barrel of single malt whiskey. So 100% malted barley, which is essentially this product here. So mash bill on this is 88% rye, 12% barley, aged in 53-gallon white American oak barrels, but still a blend between new American oak and ex-bourbon.
Very nice. So the rye portion entirely unmalted rye?
There's a little bit of malted in there, but
Okay.
it started off higher at the other distillery, and it's a little bit lower now, but it's roughly a 90-10 split.
Okay.
Yeah, and the rye, especially when we were lautering, was a lot of work. To lauter that grain, but also just to mash it and to get it to kind of gelatinize and kind of allow itself to be liquid. So the initial rye was extremely challenging to work with, but once we started to harvest whiskey from those barrels, absolutely worth it. The grainy notes, the profile is very nice. It's won a bunch of awards. I won't go through all of them, but it's been doing really well. The Canadian Arts and Spirit Awards, the Alberta Beverage Awards, the World Whiskey Awards, same with the wheat whiskey as well. So it's getting some, you know, some attention. Not that that's everything, but a lot of our friends and people around us too are like, holy shit, this is really risky. So yeah.
Very cool. So a few notes from some of the people watching. Kevin says, I actually get a berry note on the nose of the rye, either strawberry or raspberry, possibly some cantaloupe. Sammy Samhiri agrees. It does have a little bit of that dill note that sometimes arrives in rye. I find your guys' rye, what I like about it is it's on that approachable side of things. Maybe that's the malted barley coming into play there. It has this softness in there, like the spices there, but it's not overwhelming. And it is still, it's got the ride there, but it's not just like attacking you with it, which is nice.
Yeah, it's balanced. There's a lot of like green rye there. There's a lot of like pepper and spice. You get these like kind of like clove, and then on the sweet end, it's like fig. Obviously the vanilla from the Nellens and everything, and the sugars from the white oak, but it's like kind of jammy, figgy sweetness that balances out those kind of spicier, sharper. So
yeah, a bit of a banana hit up front that reminds me a little bit of some better Jack Daniels out there as well. Any ex Jack Daniels barrels in there, or what would be the source?
There might have been one or two initially. A lot of bourbon that we're getting these days, it's a mix. We got a lot of wild turkeys, but then we have some Four Roses, some Heaven Hill, some Woodinville out of Washington. We have some, and we also have some very unique barrels sitting. Something coming down the pipeline is kind of our single cask release program, which we're going to likely in the fall have our first release of that, which we're calling the Wild Life series. And there'll be limited edition, 1 barrel batches. We're designing a nice little box for it right now. But yeah, there's some very interesting barrels throughout the way. There's a Okanagan port style single malt barrel that's sitting there. We have the first release is likely going to be a rye. So same new make that would have gone into this rye that went into a peated single malt barrel. That peated single malt barrel went to a maple syrup producer. We then purchased it from them. So it's rye, but it has this touch of sweetness from the syrup, and then this like hint of like peated smoke on the end, and it's very complex, very interesting, and that'll be our first release of the Wild Cask series. So yeah, we have the new oak, we have the ex bourbons, which it's a mix, but then we have been picking up one-off barrels here and there that will start to kind of pepper into our releases as well. So
right on.
Yeah. So low wines, you guys are now sipping on the rye. You've got something to sip on while I talk a little more about the distillation. So we talked about vodka coming off a still. We're then sitting on a few toasts at a time. And then we'll be pulling, 200 or 300 liters, diluting it to 50%, carbon filtering it to clean it up further. What's coming off the still is quite neutral. But there's always going to be a touch of wildlife house character esters traveling with that spirit. Whole lot less than there would be at a lower ABV when you're doing your whiskey distillation. But that carbon filtration just kind of polishes the spirit for our vodka. And then we're also making a whole lot of gins here. So this still over here is kind of dedicated to our gin production. So touching back to what you guys tasted earlier, spirit goes in here. You have your botanicals going into the pot as well, except for your citrus peels, which are actually going in the gin basket. So just to touch back to gin, this is where all that gin is being made. We're not flavoring our whiskey still or our vodka still with botanicals, and we can, produce multiple spirits at once. So that's kind of where all the gin is made. So going into whiskey distillation, like I mentioned before, it's very similar to what you're doing on the mash side. You have slightly different mash bill makeups. The wheat whiskey is the exact same as our vodka mash bill. Different yeast, different distillation, obviously. So what we're doing is we're not running the spirit. So same low wines, but we're not running the spirit through our columns. The spirit is really just running through this first initial pot. And all of those plates bubble caps are either removed or your plate is open. So you're able to control your ABV on your spirit, allowing that spirit to come off the still a little bit lower in ABV. And as it comes off the still at a lower ABV, your flavors, your ester profiles, your oils are able to then travel with that spirit that you're not getting with a vodka. And what comes off the still is a dirtier spirit, but it's more complex. There's character there. And then that spirit itself is then being blended. So we'll do multiple runs. We'll kind of do probably, a 12 to 14 mash cycle, or 12 to 15 mash cycle, because you need kind of 3 fermenters per spirit run. And then we're kind of pushing our 1,000 liters of whiskey into our whiskey blending tank. So we might have 4 to 5 spirit runs going in this tank. We're diluting that down to barrel strength. We've experimented with barrel strength. We've done the traditional, mid 60s for our single malt. We've done a little bit of that for our wheat and rye, but we've kind of brought our ABV down a little bit, especially for our New American oak barrels. So around 55 to 60 is kind of what we're going in for most of our wheat and our rye. Yeah, what we're getting out of those barrels is just this kind of these soft wood notes, the vanillas, the caramel flavors, as opposed to a more astringent kind of wood tannin. We want a certain amount of those tannins to come through for structure, but we don't want a higher ABV spirit to extract the kind of the harsher notes from those woods itself too. So playing around with that, our theory is we're always going to be trying to improve, and if we just always do things the exact same way, we're not able to really see what's working and what isn't. So that's kind of our method of barrel aging, is just kind of trying to do different things. Once we get a mash, set, we kind of like to leave that. We like our Tabar yeast that we know makes good beer. But yeah, we're constantly changing and evolving as the business evolves and as our spirits evolve from 1.0 to 2.0. So yeah.
I get the feeling like having a bit of a mad scientist vibe in operations like this is what keeps it fun, right? Yeah, and collaborating with industry professionals that are coming in with different ideas and saying, hey, can we? So we've done a little bit of a few kind of random projects with people, kind of offside ideas that were like, yeah, sure, our gin still is not being used on Wednesday. Come on in. So playing around with different ingredients, but also networking and playing around with different people in the industry that have creative ideas too. So yeah, mad scientists. I mean, you need to be a little bit crazy to do what you're doing, and you need to whiskey to a certain extent, or vodka or gin, because a big part of what we're doing here, we're not all the distillation. We don't have a fancy lab where we're making cuts on. We're not running a gas chromatography where everything's done on sensory, right from our mashing process. We have a ton of control because it's done by hand. Fermentation, we're checking it continuously, and then making our cuts on the still, smell, taste. Sure, we're watching temperature. Absolutely, temperature is a great indicator of what spirit is coming off the still. But everything's done by sensory, and that gives us that control, because yeah, we can't just say we're not operating a industrial scale distillery where we're saying exactly how much alcohol we're getting. This is where our cut points are at this volume or this weight in heads or tails. It's it varies batch to batch, and it's all done by feel. So right on.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll dive into how's everyone doing for speed of consumption here.
Yeah, I think this is solid. This is, again, it's really cool to get the built-in tour and run through of sort of from the grain to the distillate as we're going along. It definitely gives it a little bit more of an informative feel, especially for a Kensington wine market tasting, where it's usually myself and Andrew just bullshitting people about stuff. So
yeah, well, it's fun to kind of share not only the spirits but the space, and educate people how we're producing this product. So but yeah, we'll dive into our single malt whiskey. That is the next one in your spirit flight, right?
Yeah.
So this was Our first single malt that we released, it is a 5-year-old single malt, so 100% malted barley, mash or mill mash ferment distilled at 1.0. When we go into our single malts, we're kind of changing our barrel profile and flipping it from a predominant ex-bourbon barrel and a little bit of new oak, right? So changing it from the predominant new oak and a little bit ex-bourbon for the wheat and rye. We're going kind of Scotch style ex-bourbon, but have been playing with new American oak, kind of American single malt style in this category, because I mean, we can't compete with the Scotch industry in the sense where they have 12, 15, 20-year-old, 30-year-old Scotches. So by playing with a little bit of oak and blending that in, we're able to kind of create a profile as a little more approachable for a younger single malt, right? So 5-year-old single malt, 100% malted barley, aged in predominantly ex-bourbon, a little bit of new oak, and I believe this was a 4-barrel blend. So it would have been 3 barrels of ex-bourbon and 1 new oak. Yeah.
Yeah, off the hop, there's it's very yeasty and sort of beer mash notes on the nose for me. Sammy mentions mint and chocolate off the hop for him. Seconded on the chocolate by a few people, some berry notes in there as well.
Yeah, very much a cereal grain barley. Chocolate. You do get these like, you get like stone fruit, pear, apple.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was our first attempt at single malt, being a 5-year. You know, if you taste it at your MS Whiskey Festival show, you're like, you know what? That's really good for a Canadian single malt here. But then you actually like you line it up with some scotches, and it's decent. Obviously, we're continuing to age some single malt longer to get a little more of that kind of that roundness, those softer notes that you're going to get. But we're super happy with a 5-year-old single malt from Alberta, amazing barley, the Rocky Mountain water. Yeah, kind of created a really nice profile. So yeah. Is there any questions on kind of whiskey distillation side of things, or gin distillation, or anything in that sense?
Do you use one source for your malter wise, or multiple?
For water?
For your malt?
Yeah, so we've experimented a little bit with a few different 2 maltsters really, but it is for the predominantly what our main mash is, it's a 2-row brewer's malt that we're using. We haven't played around a ton with different malt types or flavor profiles. Yeah, I mean, we've always had to balance costs with efficiency as well. But yeah, well, it's all Alberta grain, coming from two of the major maltsters in the province, out of Alex, Alberta. Yeah, we have played around with a few of the craft maltsters with some rye. The wheat we're actually sourcing from one farmer that we've sourced from him right from the start. So every year he grows a little bit more for us, and that's kind of why we, you know, the whiskey of wheat came right from the start. And yeah, we've been working closely with him, and he's involved in the project, and he's interested in, you know, the vodka and whiskey production, and
cool.
The fact that he can say, hey, how much are you going to need this year, and he'll just extend the field a little bit, is pretty cool. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'll also mention that the stillage, so after a distillation, for our beer distillation, we've got all our low wines off, but we still have roughly 3,000 liters of, you know, water and organics that's sitting in the still. So that's then pumped back across into the brewery. And then we have another farmer that comes and picks it up once a week in a kind of a retrofitted tanker truck or a vacuum truck. And he's then mixing that in with feed and feeding his cattle. So every once in a while, there'll be a cooler full of meat that shows up. Pretty awesome. But there's a lot of nutrients and proteins left in that wort or distiller's stillage, I guess, at this point. So we're kind of recycling all the bits and pieces as well.
So I've asked this before, and I think you're still a little bit a ways from having like true answers on anything, but how do you, now that you've been distilling here for about 2 years, give or take,
Yeah.
what are you noticing difference wise between for what you're looking at for aged spirit or whiskey? What the differences are between the old production facility and the new?
Yeah, I'd say the whiskey that we're tasting from 2.0, we won't probably have for another 2 years to market.
Yeah.
But there's right on the nose, you notice it right away. There is more grain there, right? Because we've gone from lautering, so fermenting and distilling off grain, to fermenting and distilling on grain. So we've got it's like, yeah, beautiful grain notes, whether it be the wheat or the rye or the barley itself. It's just like there's more grain there. What we're getting from a spirit is very similar in style to what we're producing on the old still. There's slight changes, just like there is in our vodka as well. To go from a 500-liter Olympic pot still to this sour still, there is going to be slight changes. But the whiskey coming off of this still right now today it's awesome, and I think it's going to be there's going to be a slight change, but it's still very much Wild Life whiskey. It's still full. Nice. Still round, it's still got a lot of flavor. So yeah, we're excited to kind of get to a point where this whiskey from 2.0 is coming of age as well. So nice. Yeah. So yeah, moving down the line here, we have our sherry finished single malt whiskey. So what we did here would be very similar to what we were doing when we were blending our single malt. These were 3 barrels that we then harvested. And aged in, so we bought sherry casks from Spain. We actually bought them with sherry in casks, so that we're then able to post this finishing. We can put that sherry back into those casks and refresh those barrels, as opposed to having a dry sherry cask that you're using once, twice, maybe 3 times, and then getting to a point where you're having to, continuously cycle in sherry casks. We're able to kind of refresh those casks between finishing grounds. So this was a 4-year-old single malt, 3-barrel harvest that went into 2 hogsheads, and we finished them in those barrels for 6 months. And what came out was still very much Wild Life whiskey, but has these beautiful sherry, raisin, red fruit notes that you would expect from a sherry aged or sherry finished cask. A lot of people said, hey, where's the color? And we're like, well, this was finished in a sherry cask. It wasn't aged for 12 years in a sherry cask too, right? So it very much has those sherry notes on the nose and the palate. It didn't have a time in the barrel to absorb all of that beautiful red kind of color.
Well, definitely, like you can see the DNA shared between this and the single malt we just tasted, but it does seem to add on the nose a lot of berries and red fruit and dried fruit notes in there.
Yeah, and the whiskey was slightly younger, but then spent that extra time in the sherry cask. But yeah, this was probably my favorite single malt that we've distilled to date, just with that added complexity on the finish with those sherry notes. The sherry traveled from a bodega in Spain, got on a truck on that side, on a boat, off port in Montreal, out of a container to Calgary, onto a truck in Calgary, and then Highway 9 delivered it to our warehouse. And the pallet jack driver, the delivery driver, had the pallet up in the air, wheeled it onto the back of his truck, and went straight off the back of the truck. So these 2 barrels crashed to the ground. One of the barrels kind of landed, lopsided on its head. Sherry started spilling out. Matt ran and grabbed a tote. So this whiskey the sherry that traveled in this cask from Spain miraculously made it the entire way, and then in Deadman's, where we have our warehouse, ended up all over the ground. So we lost probably 50 liters of sherry. But Highway 9 insurance basically paid for the 2 sherry barrels after the fact. So
amazing.
Yeah, bit of an interesting story on the sherry casks. Yeah.
So you asked for that same driver for deliveries after that too, then, eh?
Yeah, we'll take 3 barrels.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any notes or thoughts on the sherry from the crowd?
What do you think, guys? There's along with the raisin notes, there's just a little bit of like the Welch's red, maybe even the white grape juice in there as a top note on the nose, that I really enjoy.
Yeah, so we've kind of also ABV wise brought it up from 45.3 to 45.6 or 45.9 on the rye. We then went to 47.5 on the single malt, and then 46.1% on the sherry cask. So kind of in that 45, 46 range, 45, 47, allowing these whiskeys to kind of stand up on their own, or mix it with hops, right? When you start playing around with proofing, you're just doing a disservice to your beautiful whiskey that you've created, aged for a bunch of years, and then you blend it back to 40%. You've killed it. You've lost a lot of that complexity, the mouthfeel, the tannins that are like there and holding everything together. You just break it down a little bit too far. So we're not going to put out anything below, I think, 45, and that's just based on how we like to drink our whiskey. Hoping the people that are drinking our whiskey are sharing in those same thoughts and values around being able to, like, if you're going to drink a whiskey, make sure that, sure, you can dilute it back yourself if you want, but allowing it to kind of be the whiskey that you want to be, drinking it at bottle strength or putting some water into it. So.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that, and I feel that people that are used to sipping whiskey, this is not, again, it's still very approachable stuff, even at a young age. There's nothing like rough around the edges about it, really. And it's just super approachable, even at when you're getting into 46 and higher, which is great.
Yeah, we're obviously very biased, like I mentioned before, but really enjoying what we're putting into bottles at this point. And I think it's only going to get better as our library kind of ages. So, I mean, wheat whiskey from year one that we were harvesting, we harvested 7 barrels of the wheat and barrel of rye on that first year. So there was 14 barrels that were of age that we didn't harvest, and they're just kind of getting older and older as we go. So
cool.
Yeah.
Kevin has a question kind of regarding proofing. He's asking how you do your proofing. Do you try to set certain percentages? Do you bottle them for a period and let them marry in the bottle before you release?
Yeah, so we try and harvest at least 2 months before we know we're going to go to package. And we allow that whiskey to kind of sit in totes, and we're proofing back slowly. So on one of our first batches of the rye, we actually did, or a few of our first batches, we started to do proofing in the barrel as well. We have been utilizing that recently, but proofing in barrel or slowly proofing over 1 or 2 months allows the whiskey and the water to kind of, say hi to each other, shake hands, and become one. And you're not taking, cask strength rye at 57%, hammering it with water, shocking it completely, and then packaging it the next day. So giving it some time to breathe, giving it some time to blend with that water, and kind of it changes. It changes completely from day one if you harvest it and bring it back to 45 versus 2 months later. It's a different whiskey. And it needs time in the barrel, but it also needs time out of the barrel. So that's our belief. You could do it probably 1,000 different ways, but we're not hammering it with water. We're giving it time to kind of see what life looks like outside the barrel before it goes to the bottle. And then we're actually seeing and noticing it. I don't know if this is if others would notice it as well. But say a wheat or a rye that goes into a bottle, and you taste a sample of it the day after packaging versus 3 to 4 months later, it's like it's mellowed a little bit further. I don't think 4 to 6 months there's much change in there. It's like it's stabilized. But a brand new bottle versus a 4-month-old bottle on the same packaging run, there's slightly changes there. It becomes, it just gives it more time to just kind of become itself. So
very cool.
So going into our last whiskey for the night, Hopefully you guys have kind of seen, I mean, you got to see a couple of gins at the start. But whiskey was the dream. This is what we kind of wanted to set out to do. So to be able to now have a bunch of whiskeys in the market, they're still very much so small batches, right? So we'll release a wheat once a year in the fall. February, March, we kind of release a rye. Our single malts, like this was a release one year, this was a release next year, kind of in, you know, November, kind of winter time. And then we had a peated release last year. So still very much small batch, building our inventory so that hopefully one day we can have a wheat on the market, a rye in the market, and probably some more consistency here. But yeah, it's very small batch. Peated, I wish we have more of that sitting because it is so lovely. But this was a 4-year-old peated single malt. So it was a Simpson's malt, heavily peated malt from the UK that we brought in, distilled and then aged in half casks. So these would have been ex-bourbon half casks from Hill Rock Distillery in New York. So that was one of our trips. We do like to get around and travel a little bit, learn different regions. We went to Kentucky one year, went to New York, Scotland before we opened. This past like 2 weeks ago, I was just in Mexico and got to tour tequila for a little bit and just kind of see how they're producing spirit from agave. But yeah, New York was a cool trip where we learned of Hill Rock Distillery. They're an estate distillery producing all their grain kind of in fields around the distillery, and they're producing some nice bourbons, some really nice peated single malt. So this would have come out of some half casks from Hill Rock. And my favorite spirit to sip on that we make. Still very much Wild Life single malt, but it has these subtle peat on the nose. On the palate is where it really kind of jumps out at you, but it still has this balance. It's not just this like peat bomb. There's balance there from the barley and from the sugars in the casks, and balanced, very perfect.
Yeah, it's a cool one. Do you know what the peat source was that Simpsons had for the malt? So that they probably don't say anything about that, do they?
I'm not sure where the source was. But yeah, it was a heavily peated, which now when I taste other heavily peated malts, I'm kind of like, where did the peat go? Or was it the mashing, the fermentation, or the distillation process where we lost some of it? Because it's very approachable and it's balanced.
It is
not that intense like ashtray, campfire smoke peat that you'd expect from a heavily peated malt.
Yeah, it's a fun nose. It's got like just a touch of iodine to it, like maybe a little bit coastal, but it has a lot of the stuff that I think of as more like mainland peat characteristics, where it's got that like burning leaves in the fall note that I get off a lot of like Balakin and Ardmore and so on and so forth. Not a ton of saltiness or coastal saline notes, although that could be coming more from the distillate when you're talking about Isla too, who knows? But yeah, very approachable stuff. There is some nice sweetness in behind there. And I really like that sort of cooling menthol note that I'm getting on the nose right now as well.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, any thoughts from the crowd?
Kevin's asking if it's Washington peat. Have you had any experiments with Washington peat?
I have not. Can you elaborate?
So there are a few distilleries, one in Canada that I can think of, that have had peated malt or smoked malt from using Washington peat, and then there's Westland Distillery in Seattle that has done some experiments with it as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's peat all over the world. I know Alberta has a large amount of peat bogs. I think it's only a matter of time for craft maltsters here in Alberta to start producing a peated. I think Hammer has experimented, but I don't think they have the industrial or the scalability of it just quite yet. But yeah, the peated malt sourcing from the UK, it's great, but it's not the most affordable grain, which is why we haven't put as much of it away as we would have liked to. But this is, I would love to sip on this all the time. I like, definitely these are a little more widely available. But yeah, a pretty cool kind of range from that sweet approachable wheat to the slightly spicier, earthier rye, cereal, barley, kind of, yeah, younger single malt distillate, very much a single malt from Alberta into the finishing and then the peated world. So yeah, this stuff is really fun. To me, this is kind of why we got into it. It's the romantic side of it. And yeah, hope that you guys have enjoyed what you've tasted tonight and can help to kind of, share the story of Wild Life.
Yeah, absolutely. A few more comments from everybody on the peated malt. Sammy says hint of cinnamon in the middle unfinished, which I sometimes get in like High Coast peated malt. High Coast is a Swedish distillery that does some fantastic peated whiskey. So very high praise there, in my opinion. That was a really cool catch by Sammy. Sammy also says very cool range in the lineup. And Kevin agrees. It is really neat to see you guys using and for us to get to try all this Alberta grain and then a UK grain essentially as well, but see how the wildlife DNA is in all of them. That is fun to have them side by side like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we're really lucky here to have some of the best grain in the world. And, you know, we don't like to, you know, say anything that we're not saying we're using glacier water, but it's water running through off the mountains, through the bedrock.
Yep.
It's great water. We're not sourcing it directly from the glacier, but we're using really good raw ingredients. So we have the initial inputs are so important in the entire process. The control that we have throughout the way, it's like we're lucky to have source, but also the ability to have so much control over the process throughout the way. And then, the ability to kind of play around with blending based on using different barrel profiles within the different ranges too. So, Alberta is a great place to be a distillery and to, you know, sell into a market that, you know, loves fine stuff. And we're really stoked to continue to do this, and it's fun sharing the story. So,
right on. So, what do you have any plans for different releases whiskey wise? Or can you tease anything that you're looking at for your wild barrel project?
Yeah, I mean the one barrel that I was talking about, peated maple rye, that'll likely be coming out in the fall. We're just kind of waiting on some additional packaging to come and looking to kind of time it around other releases. You can't just drop everything all at once. We have a really nice kind of Okanagan port barrel. We'll continue to we've played around with some IPA barrels. So a barrel-aged gin barrel that we gave to a sheepdog brewery here in Canmore. They aged an IPA in it. They came back to us. Very interesting. Not sure how much of that we're going to blend with some other spirit, because it's like it's hoppy rye. It's really cool, but it's very unique, right? And it totally depends on which market you're looking to kind of bring that to. We have some whiskey that's sitting in ex-Amaro barrel. So we also make an Amaro that initially we were aging in a barrel, but those flavors are so intense and so deep that the barrel aging of 6 months from batch 1 to 2, did it change it? No. But our first couple barrels of Amaro, we have a rye that's sitting in ex-Amaro barrels, which is a very unique profile. So these one-off barrels that we're going to keep, you know, mixing into our regular core range. And that's the fun stuff. It's the things that those barrels that we're gonna get people hopefully from across Canada and across the world saying, holy shit, these guys are doing some pretty cool things. But you can only probably get it once. So
that's right.
we're not producing any of those on a massive scale. We also have started to kind of age our own maple syrup in ex-rye barrels, because we really liked the peated maple rye. So we purchased the maple syrup from Quebec and are kind of seasoning our own barrels now. So a few different things coming down the pipe. But all in all, we have with our white spirits, our vodkas, our gins, our whiskeys, our cocktail syrups. We have a tonic syrup, a mule syrup, and then bitters. We have like 25 to 30 SKUs. So we're not looking to continuously expand, do this new liqueur, this and that. It's like we have a lot of great products. What we need to do from a production standpoint is focus on producing those products better and better and better. Because you start looking at new all the time. Well, guess what? 6 months later, that SKU doesn't matter, and you have to come up with something new.
Yep.
So focusing on core, focusing on distilling spirits traditionally, and to, yeah, I mean, using the time, the materials, and like putting a lot of love into it and doing things as best as possible is kind of what we're focusing on.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, this has been awesome, Keith. I just wanted to comment too before we kind of wrap this up, but I love the packaging style that you guys changed to over the last couple of years. The black on clear for everything, and the different color for the strip is a great sort of differentiation for the different styles of whiskey, but also really pops on the shelf. I really like that look to it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was a project that we were working on for a while, and it took a while to come to fruition, but it was something that we needed in order to kind of take the packaging, bring the packaging up to where we felt the spirit quality was. So the brand positioning standpoint. And now that we're putting everything, whether it's white spirits or whiskey, so there's a black bottle for whiskey, white bottle for vodka and gins. We used to have this style of bottle, which was very challenging because everything was hand applied. So now these bottles can go on an automated kind of labeling machine, which was another big reason for why we went to a printed with label bottle and a non-tapered bottle, just from a packaging efficiency standpoint. So it was a big project, but we were stoked with the results, and it's actually, like, from a packaging standpoint, it's nice. So
nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the tour. That was an awesome tour to see everything from green to glass, essentially. It's not often that we get to see the whole process in something like this, and it was really cool to get you to the show off facility. I've really enjoyed sort of seeing you guys grow from the 500 liter still to where you guys are now. And I hope we get to continue to watch you guys grow as time goes on. This has been awesome. So thank you for this. On behalf of everybody, I look forward to putting this up on YouTube as well so people can see it, because I think just seeing the whole production level of this and the production itself is fantastic.
Yeah. Well, yeah, really appreciate you guys all tuning in tonight. Appreciate Kensington Wine Market's support over the years, and yeah, hopefully we can continue to, show Alberta, the country, hopefully, and one day what we're doing here, and we're in an amazing place to do it. So wherever you're tuning in from tonight, thank you so much, and appreciate your support and for sharing our story and drinking our spirits.
Yeah, thank you again, and thank you everybody for attending. Cheers, everybody. Have a great night.
Cheers.